The largest Pokemon trading card game tournament ever held was the 2023 North American International Championships. Every competitor dreams of becoming an international champion, but with over 2,000 Masters Division players registered for this event, and the brand new expansion Paldea Evolved becoming legal just 1 week prior, this would be an event unlike any other. It's important to understand that the Pokemon trading card game is a test of skill and luck, but much of the game happens before the tournament even begins. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of cards which are legal for tournament play at any given time, and it's the mission of every player to find the perfect combination of 60 cards for their deck. As tournaments occur and players discuss strategies amongst themselves, a metagame forms. What is a metagame? Well, it's like this. Deck 1 beats Deck 2, Deck 2 beats Deck 3, and Deck 3 beats Deck 1, sort of like the game Rock, Paper, Scissors. If players estimate that Deck 1 will be the most popular deck, they might choose to play Deck 3 in order to have an advantage. But if other players take this theory one step further, they might choose to play Deck 2 in order to beat all of the people who decided to play Deck 3. It seems like this group of people who chose to play Deck 2 would be poised to win, since many players selected Deck 3, which means less players selected Deck 1. But here's the twist. Another group of players constructed Deck 4, which beats Decks 2 and 3, but loses to Deck 1. Losing to Deck 1 would hardly matter with so many players switching to Decks 2 and 3. So statistically, Deck 4 is likely to win the tournament. That is metagaming in a nutshell, and this consumes the minds of players when preparing for the next event. As I mentioned, Paldea Evolved would become legal for tournaments just before NAIC. So how would players know what decks and strategies to prepare for without an established metagame? There were 12 sets of cards already legal for play without Paldea Evolved, so players weren't completely in the dark. Looking at LimitlessTCG.com, we can see what the most successful decks were in the months prior to this new expansion. Decks like Lost Zone Box, Lugia V-Star, Mew VMAX, Arceus V-Star, and Gardevoir EX were convincingly a step above the rest. In addition, Japan has a different release schedule than the rest of the world, so they had already played 2 major events with these new cards from Paldea Evolved. The most exciting news from the Japanese events was the presence of Lost Zone Giratina V-Star, a deck that had fallen off in Western events back in late 2022. This resurgence was sparked by Jet Energy, a new special energy card coming out in Paldea Evolved. In addition to this old archetype resurfacing, it was easy to see that Gardevoir EX had also gained a lot from the new set, including Iono and Super Rod. Online tournament data showed Chien-Pal Excalibur had been very popular the month of June leading up to NAIC, but players were uncertain about this archetype since it had been absent from the top placements at major Japanese events. Not only was Chien-Pal popular, it was also consistently placing in the top 8 of these online events. Funny enough, the real story lies with decks number 9 and 10 on this list. After 15 rounds of competition stretched over 2 days, Ian Robb found himself in the finals with Arceus Duraludon Umbreon. Ian defeated all of the top decks on his journey to the finals: Lost Zone Box, Mew VMAX, Gardevoir, Lugia, and several other Arceus decks. It seemed Ian had an excellent understanding of the metagame and constructed a great deck list for this event. However, waiting for him in the finals was Cyrus Davis, who entered the event with a deck Ian had not faced yet in his first 17 matches: Inteleon Urshifu. Inteleon Urshifu focuses on the Rapid Strike subset of cards first introduced in Battle Styles, released March 2021. Rapid Strike Urshifu VMAX is just one piece of this synergistic archetype, with cards like Octillery, Rapid Strike Energy, and Tower of Waters all complementing each other in this thematic deck. This deck had seen scattered success in the Scarlet and Violet format, most recently with 2 top 32 placements at Fresno Regionals. There wasn't much talk about the Rapid Strike archetype since Paldea Evolved was released, and it was completely absent from Japanese tournament results. How did this seemingly outdated deck make it all the way to the finals of the largest Western tournament ever held? Cyrus Davis's Inteleon Urshifu list had great matchups against Lost Zone Box and Gardevoir decks, but quite poor matchups against Mew and Lugia, with its Arceus matchups falling somewhere in the middle. It's possible to tech this deck for the Mew matchup by adding Drapion V or Spiritomb. But as we can see here, Cyrus decided to ignore the Mew matchup completely and focused on keeping the deck consistent. If many players were counting on Gardevoir EX and Lost Zone Box decks for this event, how many people could realistically show up playing Lugia and Mew? It seems Cyrus made an educated guess that there would be more good matchups for Inteleon Urshifu than there would be poor matchups, and she was incredibly correct. According to Pokestats Live, the 3 most popular decks were Gardevoir, Arceus, and Lost Zone, with number 4 and 5 being Lugia and Mew. Lugia and Mew combined were roughly 25% of the day 1 field, so if these were the only 2 decks Cyrus needed to avoid to have an ideal tournament run, the numbers looked very much in favor of a deck like Inteleon Urshifu for this event. Across 17 rounds of the largest tournament she had ever played in, Cyrus managed to avoid Mew and Lugia entirely, hitting many favored matchups like Miraidon, United Wings, Lost Zone, and Gardevoir. Now at a record of 14 wins and 3 losses, it all came down to one final match versus Ian Robb's Arceus Duraludon deck. Duraludon VMAX can potentially spell trouble for a special energy reliant deck like Inteleon Urshifu, since Duraludon VMAX's ability prevents all damage done to it by Pokemon with special energy attached. After 17 rounds of dodging Mew and Lugia, could this miracle tournament run come to a disappointing end, all because of the Skyscraper ability? An understated attribute of Cyrus's Rapid Strike deck is just how focused on consistency it was. 3 copies of Forest Seal Stone, which can retrieve any 1 card from the deck. 3 copies of Battle VIP Pass to search out multiple basic Pokemon. And a wide selection of supporters: Iono, Irida, Melanie, Professor's Research, and Karina's Focus. With so many cards dedicated to a smooth setup in the early turns, and Octillery which can keep the Rapid Strike cards coming as needed, all that was standing in the way of Cyrus winning the largest international championships ever was a few missteps from her opponent's deck. Game 1 of the Masters Division Finals starts out beautifully for Cyrus's Rapid Strike deck. Ian has a lackluster start with nothing but a Duraludon V on the board, and it stays that way for multiple turns. Although Ian is able to drag out the game for almost 20 minutes, even with an abysmal opening, Cyrus sets up a Yoga Loop play, allowing her to take an extra turn and close out the game, with Ian conceding the following turn. Game 2 goes according to plan for Ian's Arceus deck, and he is able to take it to Game 3. Just seconds into Game 3, Ian takes his first turn and cannot find any basic Pokemon to put on his bench. Over to Cyrus's second turn of the game, she quickly searches for a Tower of Waters with Octillery, and Urshifu V's 100 Furious Blows will KO Ian's only Pokemon on the board, crowning Cyrus Davis as the 2023 Masters Division North American International Champion. There's no doubt that Cyrus was helped by a perfect bracket of opponents to make this happen, facing 0 Lugia or Mew decks in 18 rounds. It also helps that her opponent Ian had a very unfortunate start in Game 3 of the most important finals match either of them have ever played. Before we jump to stating that the Pokemon trading card game is all luck, however, I'd like to remind you of a famous quote that perfectly fits Cyrus's NAIC 2023 tournament run. Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. Cyrus Davis showed an advanced understanding of the metagame and intuitive deck building skills, with an archetype many players would have wrote off as an unappealing rogue choice. When the opportunity arose, Cyrus was prepared with Inteleon and Urshifu by her side. And that is how Inteleon Urshifu won the largest Western Pokemon TCG event in history.